So welcome back. Well, we've had some questions about how we've done the wiring of our DC-DC charger for our car charging and solar panels with the lithium battery. So I'm going to try and take you through it. Here we go. So this is our Renogy DCDC MPPT controller. So this takes over charging of the lithium battery for all DC sources. So that is the car and the solar. So this uses a common negative feed. So what that means is there is only one negative feed going to this whole system. So the negative cables from the battery, from the solar and the car are all the same, all on one terminal. I've wired this into the van, trying to make as few permanent changes as possible. So I've not drilled any holes, I've not cut anything, I've not unjoined any cables and sort of redone them. So how have I managed to do that? Well, I've got the solar cables. They come from the roof through this Anderson plug, so I've got my isolation ability there, and as you can see I've got a positive and a negative. They run through here, and as you can see this cable's a little bit funny, but it's got the black on it, so that's the negative. It goes to a post in here. I've also got the main negative that feeds to the Caravan. Now the battery is in this box behind here. I didn't want to drill any extra holes, they're all really snug. But what there is my motor mover. The motor mover is isolated when it's not in use. When you're on hookup, when you're connected to your car, the motor mover is always isolated, so it's not using power. But all of the isolation is done on the positive, so the negative is permanently connected. So what I've done is I've taken that negative feed that wants to go to the battery and I've chained it on to the negative feed that's already into the battery, into the terminal here. So all it is unbolting that and putting it in. You can see I've also taken a tiny feed for this relay as well. I'll explain that in a minute. So the negative to get to the Caravan, to get to the battery, comes through the existing feed off of the battery, the one that was put in place for the motor mover. Okay. The positive feeds is where you get the separation. So you have to have a positive feed to the Caravan, to the battery. Well, I'm lucky I've got a motor mover. So what I had coming out of the battery compartment, and it's fused, was the feed for the motor mover. It comes to the back of the isolation switch, and then there's the feed. This one here comes out for the motor mover. But what I've done, so that's the feed for the motor mover. What I have done is I have added the feed to the DC-DC controller. It is before it is switched. So that is a direct feed to the battery, permanently connected using those cables that were put in place for my motor mover. If I ever want to take it out, I just unbolt that, take that cable off, bolt it back up. It was never there. Okay. Positive from the solar comes to the connector in here. So the positive for the solar is there. The car, as you would have seen on my last video, I have taken the fuse out for the car, and I have bought from Halfords, you get them online, there's links in my previous video, this splitter. So what it does is it takes the positive feed, comes from the car. Normally you put a fuse in that side where I don't have one, and that would be as though you've put the fuse directly in the unit, so it would pass it through like normal. But it takes another feed off and it runs it down this cable. By not putting that fuse in, by only putting it on that side, I'm isolating the positive from the original battery wiring, from the original Caravan wiring. So I am now taking the car feed to this cable. So if I plug him back in, there we go. So he runs along the side here and into the side of the DC unit, and it connects in here. Okay, so that is how we've isolated the car, protected the car from being directly connected to the lithium battery, because originally what would happen is the battery connectors from the consumer unit would have just connected the battery directly through a relay to the lead acid battery, and normally lead acid battery connected directly to a car, that's absolutely fine. But with the lithium could draw too many amps. So this DC-DC charger, not only will it make sure that the voltages are correct for a lithium battery, but it'll also make sure that you're not drawing too many amps. This Renogy, I've got the 30 amp version, there is a 50 amp version. You can limit it in the software to either, I think it's 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 amps, depending on which ones you've got. Now, the thing to bear in mind with this 30 amp version, it will charge maximum of 30 amps in total. Now, most cars are going to be fused at 15 to 20 amps, so you might need to do less than that in the software, unless you change something in your car. But what I'm saying is, if you set this to 30 and you're getting solar and the car is plugged in, the maximum you'll get from the car and the solar individually is 15 amps. It will split in half its ability between the two sources. If there's no solar coming in, you can get the full 30 from the car. If there's no car, you can get the full 30 from the solar. Okay. Other thing to bear in mind on the solar, this has a maximum voltage, again double check me, but I believe it's 25 volts from the panels. So don't just go out and buy any panel, make sure it is within that voltage limit. Okay. So I do also have a relay connected, and I'll explain why that is. This has some built-in protection for the car battery. Okay, so it will only take a low number of amps depending on the voltage of the battery. The higher the voltage of the battery, the starter battery, the car battery, the more ampage it will take out. Now, what you might find, as I do, is that my car has a smart alternator. When it thinks it has enough power, it will ramp down the voltage. It will even, when you stop the car at traffic lights, turn the engine off. And when that happens, obviously you stop charging, or you're charging at a very, very low rate. there is a socket in here and the cable comes with it. It's this big long one that I've got connected up. An ignition wire. So the idea is that you could run that to your ignition source and it knows if the ignition is on. But in the case of a car, that's pretty difficult to do, really annoying. So what I've done is I fitted this relay. Again, it works with the Renogys. With Zigbee, I can control it from my phone. When I turn that on, it's basically telling the Renogy that the engine is running. Take as much power as you can. And in that way, you could run the battery down in the car if the engine wasn't running, but that way it will try and take as much power as it can. It won't worry about the voltage, knowing that the car alternator is there, it's being smart, and actually if the alternator needs to ramp up the voltage to handle the load from the Caravan, it will do. So without that it will still work, but it won't charge as fast if you've got a modern car, you know, a Euro 5, Euro 6 engine with that start-stop with that smart alternator. Okay, so I hope that explains, I hope that helps. Please do ask any questions. If there's any more that I can help with or try and explain a bit better, please let me know. Love your comments and keep them coming. Thanks.